Hey, here I am reviewing The November Man in August. I actually saw two movies today. I saw The Giver first, and then I went to see November Man. It's the opening day. And so far at the box office, it's not at number one, but it just opened, so we'll give it some time. I'll see how it does over the weekend. Movies are really not doing good right now, but then again, it's kind of that time of the year where that happens. It kind of happened last year too, but we talked about it in a previous review. Austin and I did that Expendables 3 didn't do very well. In fact, it bombed pretty bad. Into the Storm didn't do well either. Holy crap! Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. That movie tanked, which. Man, that's kind of a shame because, man, like, I might have had some problems with Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. I might have. Yeah, I pointed that out in my review. I liked it a lot more than Expendables 3, and I liked it a heck of a lot more than November Man. That's pretty sad. Guardians is still at number one. I'm okay with that because I loved Guardians. But I thought that really sucks that A Dame to Kill For is just tanking and no one gives a crap. So let's talk about November Man. The director of this film, the last movie he did was Seeking Justice with Nicolas Cage and Guy Pearce. I love Nicolas Cage. Man, does that movie suck. I remember watching that movie a couple years ago on Netflix. I think it came out in like 2011, I think. So it's been a few years, but I remember like looking at the synopsis of it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, let's go see what this is like. I love Cage, and when it was over, I was like, man, that movie sucked, and it was not well directed. So how does this movie hold up? It's not very well directed. But actually the direction is... The direction doesn't suffer as much as the writing does. This is not a good movie. It's really not. It's soul-saving grace. The only thing that's really... Okay, there's two things that's really keeping this movie from, like, showing up on my worst films of the year list is, one... It is kind of a, it's not super hard R, but it's a little bit of a hard R, which was kind of cool. It had some good action moments that were pretty entertaining. But to go along with that, Pierce Brosnan is awesome in this movie. The first action film I ever saw, at least that I can remember as a kid, was 007 GoldenEye. And so I have kind of a soft spot for Pierce Brosnan doing action films. I am all for Pierce Brosnan doing action films. And when I saw the trailer for the first time for November Man and him being the lead, I was like, all right, sweet, And he does not go to waste. He is giving this film his all. He is going full on. And you know what? If there is one thing the writing does well with this film, it's his character for the most part. He's a BA. He does some cool stuff in this movie. And they take advantage of that, which is great. Unfortunately, everything else falls flat. If it's not being dull and generic and just the same old stuff we've seen before, it's being stupid and being terribly structured. This movie's structure of plot is insane. It is everywhere. It focuses on this, and then goes to that, and then goes to this, and then it takes in characters that I feel like we should have known throughout the whole film, but we're just now being introduced to, and then suddenly giving them something to do. And it's not well written, it's not well executed. It is based on a book. I have the feeling like the book is a lot better. But I don't know. I would hope so. I think it's actually a book series based on the character that Pierce Brosnan plays, which if that's the case, let's see another adaptation of this book with Pierce Brosnan, but just give a more competent director behind it. Excuse me. And whoever it is that's going to adapt it into a screenplay, have them do a better job too. Because Pierce Brosnan's character is the only character that's really working well. So, what's it about? Like I said, I don't know how much I can talk about the plot because the plot doesn't make much sense. It's not well structured. It's like Pierce Brosnan works for government and he's training. I'm trying to find the actor's name. Luke Bracey. Luke Bracey is like the second lead, and he's this rookie agent, and so he trains him for a while, but then an operation goes sour. After the operation goes sour, Pierce Brosnan quits the government job, and then he is brought back into the job a few years later by Bill Smitrovich, who I feel like I should know this guy better because when I looked up his filmography, he's actually been in a lot of movies I've seen. But I did not recognize him when I was watching him on the screen, but he's like another lead in it. But Bill Smitrovich is like, he sits down with Pierce Brosnan. It's like 8 years later, if I recall. No, not 8 years, or something like that. It's years after the operation that went sour. He tracks down Pierce Brosnan, who's living the generic retired life, and he gives him the classic, "we need you back in the game" garbage. So Pierce does it, and he only does it because it involves an ex-lover, and of course, when he does this mission, his ex-lover gets killed, and Luke Bracey is behind the operation that gets her killed. So, I took notes, by the way, so I'll be glancing at this, just so I don't forget everything. So, after that, Pierce is kind of going after Luke, while also trying to figure out what this whole operation that he was going after was really about, because it turns out that there's like a government conspiracy involving the Russians as well as the American CIA. And Bill Patton is in there for a little bit playing not bad guy CIA, and the whole time he's being Bill Patton. He's doing his kind of southern, like kind of intimidating, ruffled voice that he always does. It was really weird seeing him with hair. It's one of the few times I've seen him have hair in a movie, or in a show for that matter. I'm used to him, with the shaved head, or at least with only a little bit of hair, whether it be something soft like Remember the Titans, or playing a menacing bad guy like in 24 or The Punisher. But it's kind of funny seeing him with a good amount of hair. But throughout the whole film, they keep hinting that Bill Patton is so obviously the bad, corrupt government dude. And it turns out he's not. It turns out to be Bill Smitrovich, the guy who, kind of brought Pierce Brosnan back into the game in the first place, which makes no sense. I do not get that. When you learn that character, that Bill Smitrovich is the mole, it's like, if he's the mole, why did he single-handedly bring Pierce Brosnan back in? Because all Pierce does is get in his way from there on out. So if they explained it, it must have... Again, it's kind of hard. I had a little bit of a hard time following this plot. But here's the other thing, too. It's not that the plot was very complex. It's that the movie is pretty boring half the time. So I had kind of a hard time giving a crap. The first half of this movie, with the exception of the action scenes with Pierce Brosnan, which were pretty good for the most part, a lot of the dialogue is so generic, it's just boring to sit through. Maybe it's because I had watched The Giver and then I wasted an hour at Old Chicago drinking beer, then I come back to watch another movie, so maybe I was just a little tired. I don't know. I had a hard time following some of that though. But at the same time, I didn't give a crap because it was so dull and generic. So you'll forgive me if my knowledge of the exact plot isn't precise. But, I mean, so, like, alright, so something that's kind of funny. Luke Bracey, the former student of Pierce Brosnan, who's now working with the government, and he's going after Pierce Brosnan while Pierce Brosnan is going after this conspiracy and unfold it and get revenge because his former lover was killed in the process. There's some moments where Luke Bracey and Pierce Brosnan are talking to each other over the phone, and they're kind of bantering, and they're kind of trash talking each other, and some of the lines they had were kind of funny, like intentionally, but I don't know. I felt like some of the banter between the two characters, it was almost like they were in a former relationship. It was almost like it was almost like Pierce Brosnan was talking to an ex-boyfriend of his. And same with Luke Bracey. Like, they kind of talk like, they act like they're divorced almost, some of the dialogue. And I thought that was kind of funny at times. Especially when Pierce Brosnan breaks into Luke Bracey's apartment while Luke Bracey has a one-night stand with his neighbor. And Pierce Brosnan has the neighbor, this girl who has like just a shirt on, he has her at gunpoint with a knife up to her neck, and Luke Bracey's kind of like freaking out. And Pierce Brosnan is like being super dark in this scene, but almost in a campy way. So instead of it being like super intimidating, it's kind of unintentionally funny. So I kind of enjoyed that. There's some really dumb dialogue in this film. I don't know if it was in the book or not, but man, some of these lines were so stupid. There was one where Pierce Brosnan is talking to this woman who he's protecting throughout the film because she can help, she has information that can uncover this whole government conspiracy. So like there's a chase scene between him and Luke Bracey, and he's, Pierce Brosnan is trying to keep the woman safe. So at one point when they're safe, they're both talking to each other, and here comes the scene where she asks him what his connection is with Luke Bracey, and he brings up the exposition. But what's funny about it is the line she says to bring this conversation up. They're not talking much, and then this is the line, okay, ready for it? She says, "Why do you hate him? That man who just tried to kill us. Why do you hate him?" The man who just tried to kill us. Why do you hate him? That is so stupid. This movie, as bad as it is, it's probably not going to make my top, 10 worst lists of the year. Mostly because of Pierce Brosnan's solid lead performance. But that line, if I were to have a top 10 dumbest lines of the year list, that would definitely be one of them. Holy crap. Someone actually wrote that down. And not just that, there's some really cliche, dumb lines that are written in there. And, no offense to Bill Smitrovich. I've seen you do a lot of good movies. I apologize for not recognizing you. He does not give a very good performance as the villain. There's some of his stuff is all right. Like there's one part where he's being interrogated by the CIA, and he's being interrogated by a woman, and some of his harassing banter that he kind of throws on her was kind of funny and kind of well done, but there's some pretty bad lines read. I mean, not that the lines were that well written, but he does not give the best performance ever. That's putting it lightly. And also, not just him as an actor, his character sucks. And again, his motivations for some of the things he does not make much sense. So, what else? What else is there to bring up? Okay, so again, the action scenes, for the most part, they're fine. There's some pretty cool moments with it being an R-rated film. Pierce Brosnan's most well-known action stuff is the Bond stuff, and that's all PG-13. So it was kind of cool seeing Pierce Brosnan do an R. There's some pretty brutal moments, which were kind of cool. Luke Bracey also has some cool action moments, and Luke Bracey also I think he overall does a decent job in the film as kind of the second lead. I'll say that's some good stuff. As far as, again, going back to just it's not good structure. It turns out that Pierce Brosnan has a daughter, and we learn about this about halfway into the film. It's just mentioned, I might add. They don't talk about it much. Luke Bracey, like, literally finds out on the computer through pictures that Pierce Brosnan has a daughter. And so he says, like, he has a daughter. And then we drop that. That gets dropped, and we go back to the main plot. The last 20 minutes of the film, Pierce Brosnan is talking to the woman that he's been protecting throughout the film, and they're just having small talk, and then she wants to know more about his personal life, so he brings up that he has a daughter. This is the second time in the film that it's mentioned. The first time it was just briefly talked about, and then now it's being talked about, only this time we're learning more about it. And so he's like, I have a daughter. Her name is Lucy. I think she's like 9 years old or 10 years old, something like that. He's like, her name is Lucy. I'm actually going to be picking her up from boarding school soon. And the moment this conversation ends, the phone rings, and Bill, the bad guy, calls Pierce Brosnan, and he's literally just saying, well, guess what, Pierce Brosnan? I have your daughter hostage because I'm evil. And it was... Okay. It is very common to set up the third act of an action film where someone gets kidnapped. Duh. That's kind of a cliche. You know, bad guys kidnap someone. In many cases, it's the main character's daughter or something like that. You know, someone that's personal to them. And then the third act is them, the main character, trying to save that person from the bad guys. That's common. In a good film, this character who gets kidnapped towards the end of the film, is someone we know some things about, and someone that we've known for a while in the film. What you don't do is just name drop this character at one point and then leave that character alone, and then right before introducing the kidnapping of this character, briefly talk about this character. Like, it doesn't work. You cannot just introduce a character towards the end of the film and then immediately have that character kidnapped, and then the last act be that character that we know nothing about, that we were just introduced to, be saved. It doesn't work. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, at the end, Pierce he kills the bad. Actually, no, he doesn't kill the bad guy. I forgot about that. But he kills bad guys. But he doesn't kill the head bad guy. But he saves his daughter. Things again. I'm butchering these names. He saves his daughter. Luke Bracey ends up joining Pierce Brosnan's side because he starts to realize how screwed up the government that he works for is, and the woman that Pierce Brosnan's been protecting throughout the film testifies her side. End of movie. D. I'm giving it a D. This is not good. The only writing-wise, again, I know I keep repeating myself, the only really good thing about this is Pierce Brosnan. But I mean, he does some cool stuff though. There's some pretty cool moments with him. There's one part where when Luke, kind of early in the film, when Luke Bracey is trying to track him down, they get a surveillance camera. They get surveillance camera footage of him in a city, and when they take a still of that and they zoom in on Pierce Brosnan, he is directly like looking into the camera and like waving, as if to say like Pierce knows that he's being watched and he doesn't care. Like, that was pretty cool. Like, and there's one part where Brosnan breaks into a house and knocks out two bad guys, and then when it cuts back to Brosnan, he's on the computer in that house, and the two bad guys are completely saran wrapped around each other. That was pretty cool too. But and there's also one part where he's interrogating a guy and he plays Russian roulette on the guy to get information. That's the second time the past week I've seen that, because Sean Bean did that in Legends. But anyways, it's not very good. I don't recommend it. If at the very most, I would say if it comes on Netflix, I guess, yeah. I guess a Redbox rental if you're really that interested, but do not see this in the theater. Do not see this in the theater. So, that's November Man. So I'll go ahead now and talk about The Giver. Okay, so The Giver. I read this book back when I was in middle school. I think I was in 7th grade. I was either in 7th grade or 8th grade when I read it. So, comparing the movie to the book, I'm going off of middle school memory here. But I remember liking the book, though. It was the first time I had ever read a story taking place in a futuristic utopian society. I never, at that time, really heard of such a setting like that for a story. So that was kind of cool for me. It was kind of an eye-opener for me, something at that time I had not seen. And I remember liking the book a lot, and there was a lot of stuff about the book I remember very well, and I remember seeing that when it happens in the film, or when it doesn't happen in the film for that matter. And so yeah, I do like the book. I do. I haven't read it in a long time, but I do remember liking it quite a bit. So when I heard that they were making a movie, I was pretty on the fence, and then I saw the trailer, and then I was not looking forward to the movie, because seeing the trailer, I noticed one of the biggest differences between the book and the movie. In the book, the main character, Jonas, is, I believe, like, I think he's like 11 or 12, 13, something like that. Like, he's a preteen. He's really young. In the movie, he's this hot 17-year-old. And his friends are hot 16, 17-year-olds. So let me get this straight. Really good-looking teenagers in a utopian society, learning that the utopian society is, in fact, dystopian, and it's corrupted, and they try to rebel against it. Sound familiar? Sound like other movies that have been coming out lately? Yeah, it's the whole reason that this movie was adapted was to cash in on the Hunger Games. That's all. That was the motivation. Obviously, you cannot fool me. Between Divergent and this Maze Runner movie coming out and this, it's pretty obvious, okay? When Twilight came out, there were all those other rip-off films coming out, and it was a big hit with the teens. And the Hunger Games here is a big hit with the teens, so now there's all these rip-off films basing themselves off of books that deserve much better credit than that. The Giver is a really good book, and people have talked about adapting it for years. In fact, I think decades. And the fact that they finally adapt it, and its sole reasoning behind it is to cash in on the success of the Hunger Games, I find infuriating. So I came into this kind of wanting to hate it, as you can tell. Like, I was kind of wanting to not like this film. And the fact that it isn't getting good reviews, I thought would help. I hate to say it, but I'm not going to be biased. I'm going to admit it. I actually kind of liked this movie. I didn't love it, but I actually kind of liked it. A lot more than I thought I was going to. Is it cashing in on the Hunger Games? Yeah, it is. I actually don't think it, for the most part, did a terrible job adapting the book. Yeah, there's an age difference between the main character, between the main characters for that matter. And yeah, the movie, of course, doesn't go as deep as the book does. Of course not. It still gets a lot of the main story elements there. It's still, actually, in my opinion, pretty well acted. I think Katie Holmes does a great job playing this brainwashed housewife in this utopian brainwashed society. Jeff Bridges admittedly is like the perfect choice for the Giver. And of course, Meryl Streep being like the evil head of the utopian society was a great choice. And we'll get to the visuals in a second. But yeah, so I mean, the acting was actually pretty good. A lot of the adapting I thought was good too. I mean, yeah, it doesn't go as deep as the book does. I don't think it really needs to, though. I mean, maybe if I reread the book, I would disagree because it's been a long time. But I still remember when I was watching the movie, there were a lot of things happening where I was like, yeah, I remember that being in the book, you know. And I remember it being pretty similar, but I could be wrong on that. But I don't think it does a bad job with that. It's not a very long film. It goes by at a pretty good pace. And what really goes with it well is the visuals. It's really beautifully shot. There's some great camera work in here, and the special effects are good. I loved its representation of colors, which is very, very key in the book. And I remember that. And I think they did that really well in the film. Yeah, it's cashing on the Hunger Games, and I really wish it didn't, because then they could have gone for something more ambitious and more faithful to the book. But it's really not that bad of a film, I don't think. I actually came out of it pretty entertained. I wasn't bored by it. Yeah, really, I don't hate it at all. I don't love it, but I would give it a C plus. Yeah. One big change that I think a lot of people that love the book will have a problem with, I'm kind of in between on it as far as how I feel about it, is the ending. The book's ending is not as complete. It leaves on a very open note. It does not have a full resolution. And it leaves an ending where only two roads... It leaves an ending where there are only two roads that this story can end. One of them being pretty good, one of them being pretty depressing. And it doesn't let you know what that ending is. Now, from what I've read, the writer of The Giver actually wrote some other books that take place in this universe, and I think they kind of explain what happens from there on. But if we're going by just the book, you don't know exactly how this ends. The movie gives you its ending. It gives you the ending, which I'm sure a lot of people would argue is for the worse. I think, again, if this wasn't trying to be a Hunger Games, and if this was trying to be the best adaptation it could be, ending it the way the book ended it would have worked really well. But I do think with the changes they made in the film that made it more of the traditional teen, utopian, dystopian, sci-fi adventure flick, again, Hunger Games train here, Divergent train here, if the movie was exactly the way it's been, but then they threw in that open ending, I don't think it would have worked as well. But so I'm kind of in between on that. I really wish at the end of the day that this got the adaptation that it deserves. But I still think they did a good job with what they had, with what the final product is, for the most part, even if it doesn't quite live up to its potential. So, yeah, C+. Yeah, there's really not much else to say about it. I mean, I don't really want to get too much into the plot. I would say read the book. Go see the movie. I'd say maybe catch a cheap matinee showing. It's been out for a few weeks. I'm pretty late on doing this review. But yeah, maybe a cheap showing. Don't pay full price. Don't do that. So, all right. So that's my review of The Giver. I'll have some more reviews up soon. So thanks for watching. See ya.